Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. The Star Wars galaxy is full of all sorts of interesting factions and species, and these people's cultures and belief systems are directly reflected in the ships they design and take to the stars, or so Grand Admiral Thrawn would tell you. And so today I want to design the perfect starfighter core, and in order to do this, I'll have to draw from ships from many different factions all throughout Star Wars history. The backbone of any modern space fleet is the starfighter core. Based on large carrier vessels or space stations, these small starships are what extend a fleet's range and influence. Starfighters can screen for enemy attack forces and, more importantly, intercept and destroy enemy capital ships before they can get close enough to destroy friendly capital ships. Generally speaking, naval forces without a very robust and flexible starfighter core will struggle in most type of combat situations. The first fighter we'll be talking about on this list is the Fang class starfighter from Star Sub Corporation and Mandal Motors. This was a Mandalorian-designed space superiority fighter, used most famously by the Mandalorian Protectors. What made the Fang fighter so incredible in a dogfight was its maneuverability. Not only could the wings swivel around the ship's cockpit, the engines had vector thrust control, giving the pilot an insane amount of agility. When the Fang fighter came into contact with the legendary Rebel YWing Interceptor, they quickly took apart what was widely believed to be one of the best interceptors in the Galactic Civil War. Also, top Rebel pilot Aera Syndulla was piloting one of the YWings, and not even she stood a chance. The Fang fighter was also piloted by Mandalorians, who arguably made some of the best professional soldiers in the galaxy. The result is a craft that can dominate almost anything thrown against it. While the YWing was a terrific interceptor, it was often finicky to maintain, and most YWing pilots had a death wish and stripped the shield generators from their ship to coax even more speed out of the engine. We have to remember that even though the mission is important, pilots are extremely expensive to train and not easily replaced, so survivability is key here too. Also, while YWings were pretty good at taking out TIE fighters, an interceptor's job is mainly to destroy enemy bombers and assault craft from reaching vulnerable air bases, space stations, and carriers. Even though the YWing lacks a bit of firepower, when it showed up on the battlefield, the Empire immediately started research and development of their own interceptor to basically match up against it. What they came up with was the TIE Interceptor. It was the fastest TIE fighter ever created and almost as fast as the YWing. But like all TIE fighters at the time, it lacked shields and hyperdrives. But its 6 forward-facing lasers made up for it. But then the First Order came along, and with them a knack for improving old Imperial designs and basically getting rid of any weak spots. The Interceptor was given an improved power system which allowed for the addition of deflector shields on board along with a Class 2 hyperdrive. The Interceptor now had a missile launcher system on it and was painted red, invoking Red Baron vibes. But instead of Captain Manfred von Richthofen, behind the sticks you have Major Elric von Reg, who not only flew sorties in the TIE Baron, but he also personally helped design the superior interceptor. The YWing is actually more of a light interceptor. Whereas normal interceptors chase down enemy bombers before they can reach their target, a light interceptor has a shorter range and usually is extremely nimble. It is the last line of defense before a ship's point defense weapons kick in. The YWing and the TIE Fighter both fit into this category, but they both have a really big disadvantage because they actually require pilots to fly them. A pilot needs a cockpit. They also need inertial dampeners to prevent gravity from crushing them. They need life support to keep them nice and warm or cool, and of course oxygen, or whatever gases their species prefer for survival. This is why no matter how light and agile a manned starfighter is, it still will never compete against a droid tri-fighter. Manufactured by Flak Arfak Automata Industries, the droid tri-fighter was the premier light interceptor used by the Confederacy of Independent Systems. It was only 5.4 meters in length, a meter and a half shorter than the YWing, and the smallest fighter deployed during the Clone Wars. The tri-fighter was very compact and had 4 laser cannons along with Discord missiles carrying the dreaded buzz droids. And so not only was it very nimble and a small target, it could also dish out a lot of punishment. During the Battle of Coruscant, the tri-fighter decimated the larger 3-man ARC-170 and completely changed the Republic and the later Empire starfighter policies, which eventually led to the TIE Fighter platform. There are also rumors that the Tri-Droid fighter's droid brain is related to the one found inside of the Droideka. There just aren't that many fighter-bomber variants in the Star Wars galaxy, and perhaps one of the reasons why that is because, well, one single design was used by the Rebellion, the Resistance, and also the Republic. We of course are talking about the Y-Wing. First, we have the original BTLB Y-Wing, which was the original design used during the Clone Wars. This starfighter was quite bulky and lacked the maneuverability of smaller fighters, but had great straight-line speed and a rear gunner turret. More importantly, it could carry a pretty large payload, including 12 proton torpedoes, or proton bombs, or even ion torpedoes. The Y-Wing was hyperdrive equipped, durable, and shielded, but nothing really stood out about this ship's design. It simply just worked. The Y-Wing would play a huge part in the destruction of the Malevolence. It flew countless bombing missions to bail out clone infantry, and was remembered fondly by all the clones who fought alongside it. And so it's not surprising that almost 2 decades later, the Rebel Alliance would revive the Y-Wing and continue to use it as a fighter bomber. This variant would be known as the BTLA-4 Y-Wing, which makes it sound really official and not just a Clone Wars era BTLB Y-Wing that Rebels would steal from Imperial scrapyards and then do some DIY home modifications to the chassis. In order to keep with modern fighters at the time, the BTLA-4 had significant weight reduction. This means the rear gunner turret is completely removed, along with a lot of the outer panels that used to cover the engines. This reduced the overall length of the Y-Wing and also made it easier for Rebel engineers to work on the ship. These designs and modifications worked so well that post-Galactic Civil War, the original manufacturer actually created a version of the Y-Wing inspired by these Rebel modifications. This ship would be known as the BTA-NR2 Y-Wing. It's kind of like when Triumph bought back the Bonneville and then gave us a bobber option. This ship had an all-new power plant and engines, but was more or less visually very similar to the BTLA-4. The Rebellion would use the BTA-NR2 Y-Wing against the First Order, and it would perform admirably considering how ancient the design is. By definition, a reconnaissance fighter's main job is to observe the enemy and then report findings back to base. In order to do this, you need a high-performance ship which has great sensors and also some type of stealth ability, like active cloaking or engine baffling to reduce the vehicle's signature. Or in the case of the YWing, Fang, York-et, or Coral Skipper, you could just have a ship that pretty much is camouflaged as a little tiny rock. When the New Republic first encountered the Coral Skippers, they were completely stunned by what they were seeing. The Coral Skipper not only looked like a chunk of space rock, it was also powered by a very different propulsion system, which was actually just a black hole. These black holes also sucked in any incoming laser bolts or missiles. The vehicle signature on these vessels was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, so it was very difficult to actually detect these ships. Now, the Coral Skipper did have some problems. For one, it couldn't travel long distances without a mothership to tether to, and also it flew poorly in atmosphere. Now, sometimes you need to send starfighters on a long-range patrol because you're searching for an enemy fleet or some massive superweapon like the Malevolence. To increase your chance of finding things, you'll most likely have to send out multiple starfighters in many different directions. For these long-range patrols, there is no ship better suited for the mission than the Aggressive Reconnaissance 170 from Incom. This 3-man starfighter is famous for struggling against the Separatist droid fighters during the Battle of Coruscant, but that's because the ship was clearly not designed for close-range knife fights. For one, the ARC 170 is massive, and it also has room for a co-pilot and rear gunner. The ship also has one of the most robust sensor packages on any starfighter during the war and has a 1.5 class hyperdrive. This ship could operate away from the fleet for weeks, if not months on end. The 2 pilots can take turns piloting, which keeps the vessel in operation for longer periods of time as well. It also should be mentioned that its main forward armament, aside from the proton torpedoes, are wingtip medium laser cannons, which cycle at an extremely low rate, but provided enough punch to do some real damage against even larger ships. The TIE Striker was designed specifically for the Imperial Army as an air superiority fighter. While most fighters like the X-Wing and TIE Fighter fought its way through atmosphere thanks to its inertial dampeners and repulsor lifts, the TIE Striker was actually designed to be aerodynamic. It functioned much more like a fixed-wing aircraft, and so it's not surprising that these fighters would dominate normal space-worthy starships in an airfight. So there you have it, guys. That is my hand-selected list of the best starfighters in the galaxy in each one of the various roles you might want in your starfighter corps. Let me know in the comment section below if I'm missing anything that you consider to be the best. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.